Awesome. Okay. And well, I'm sure that there will still be people joining, as we go through. It happens all the time. So we're going to get started with some introductions, and I'm going to kick it off, and then I'll ask my panelists to also introduce themselves. And if you have a tie to Tufts, bring that into the picture. But I'm Lisa. I manage our STEM program at iRobot, which is really about inspiration, about talking to students about what STEM brings, what the opportunities are, and where you can go with it. So I'm a civil engineer by training, but have been doing outreach for a very, very long time. So if you guys want to go through, I'm not going to call on you, just figure out how to introduce yourselves.
I vote for Megan to go first.
I'm so happy to go. That's a personality trait of mine. I'm always happy to go first. Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. My name is Megan. I am a data scientist at iRobot. I work on the product data science team, which means that I work with all kinds of robot data. I could talk about it for hours, so I'll stop there. I did not go to Tufts. I went to undergrad and grad school at BU, but a lot of my friends went to Tufts, and particularly my two best friends met doing comedy at Tufts, and now they're gonna get married in September. So that's my closest tie. And I'm gonna start a whole popcorn thing. I'm gonna go straight to Jimmy because I'm just so excited we're here together.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy. I am a software engineer at iRobot. I work on a bunch of different teams doing a bunch of different things. I never really know how to answer that question. I also did not go to Tufts. I applied there for transfer, but I was not accepted. So that's strike one on my permission to fail tour. Who else is with us? I guess, Steve, you're an iRobot person, right? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name is Steve Branham. I'm a software engineer working on embedded systems. And I'm sort of the extreme end of the permission to fail because I went to Northwestern University for a year and then I dropped out, but still got a career doing this.
I go next. Oh no. Uh-oh. I hear scissors for it, Whitney.
You can go ahead, Quinn.
Sounds good. So hi, I'm Quinn. I am a project manager, but I used to be a mechanical engineer. It's what I studied undergrad for. I know, Megan, that was a shocking look. I know I've moved inside the company, but I'm still here. So I look forward to sharing with you that kind of a move that you can make once you're an engineer. But I'm actually in grad school at Tufts right now. I'm going through the Master's of Science in Engineering Management. So that's my closest tie. I'm there every Tuesday and Thursday. Now to Whitney.
So I'm Whitney. I'm a test engineer. So we perform experiments on the robot and make sure they're okay to go out to the customers. And recently started managing my own group. We do advanced development and test development work. And I went to Tufts for my master's and my PhD, which I did in soft robotics with Chris Rogers and Barry Trimmer.
Whitney, I've been dying to meet you. I tried to steal your intern from you.
Oh yeah. Yep, she's one of my new reports. She's great.
Who's left? Ryan, are you?
Yep, I will jump in there. So my name is Ryan. I'm a product manager for iRobot. I did actually go to Tufts for undergrad. I was a class of 2014 and I was an electrical engineer. Jumped a little bit around, so did consulting and now back towards the engineering side. So have a little bit to talk to you there about the permission to fail.
This is great. And again, when we do the panel, I don't always know everybody's story. And so it evolves as we go through the panel. And on our side, it's always a really fun way to get to know coworkers. And the intern that Megan referenced will come up in this conversation when we talk a little bit more about the value of networking and internships. So to start though, let's talk a little bit about freshman year. What was it like? Did you come in knowing what you wanted to do and everything was hunky-dory from there? Did it pan out to be what you thought? If for instance, I came in as a civil engineer and we didn't really build anything until junior year. So talk to me a little bit about freshman year. And again, just jump in as you want. You don't all have to answer.
I actually switched majors 3 or 4 times freshman year, and I think a few of those switches happened in the first couple weeks. I didn't really have like, I knew that I wanted to do robotics. I didn't really know kind of how that like where I wanted to focus on. I liked robotic prosthetics, but I didn't really know what I was interested in, and was in biomedical engineering. I was actually in chemical engineering for a little bit because I was interested in vaccines as well, completely different things. But eventually kind of settled on mechanical engineering. And it meant that sophomore year I had to kind of catch up on some classes, but I'd also already taken a few classes freshman year that the mechanical engineers took sophomore year. So it ended up not being too bad of a switch for me. But I definitely wish I'd kind of seeked out kind of more advice on like what the different engineering disciplines are and how to get to where I wanted to be.
Anyone
You
else?
know,
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I didn't bounce around very much, but I kind of bounced around after the fact. But freshman year, it was pretty good, to be honest. I came in as an ME. It was a small group. It was about 80 people in my program, and that whittled down by like 20 people by the end of the year. We actually did a lot of projects in the first semester. It was really fun, but I picked the program to do a lot of projects, so I kind of got what I asked for. And yeah, I met a lot of good people. Freshman year was kind of like, getting established with the cohort and meeting those people that I ended up being really, really close friends with come senior year.
Yeah, I'm kind of halfway between Whitney and Quinn. So I declared my major by the end of freshman year and then stayed with it through the rest of college. But at orientation, I changed my major. So I went into college thinking that I was going to study international relations because I wanted to be James Bond. I wanted to be Carmen Sandiego. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. And then at orientation, I found out that when you study international relations, all you study is history and politics. And I hate studying those two things. So I realized this is not the major for me. And so I don't know how orientation at Tufts works, but at BU, you go to orientation, and then at the end of orientation, you walk into a room and you register for classes. And on the way into that room, I just veered left, sat down with an academic advisor and said, I need to change my major right now. She's like, okay. So then I was undecided for a bit. So I went in I started officially as an undeclared major freshman, got an undeclared major advisor, and then lived my life as an undeclared major for a while. And then by the end of freshman year, like suddenly remembered that I like math, and then did a little bit of research, went through every single course in the course catalog of BU, crossed off every single one because I thought I would hate it, except for math. And then what sealed the deal was I found out that BU had a statistics specialization track. And I was absolutely obsessed with my AP stats class in my senior year of high school. So I was like, great, stars are aligning. I will hate everything except math. And they have a track based on something that I loved in high school. Declared it towards the end of second semester, freshman year, stuck with it. But I would say, since we're talking about permission to fail here, academics was fine. Like I declared a major. I was pretty happy with it. I started thinking that it was awesome. Then like towards the middle of college, I hated it. And we can talk about that later. Ended loving it. Social life was the hard part. I don't know if anyone here can relate to the concept of first semester friends, those friends that you meet the moment you go to college and then you never talk again after winter break freshman year. That was my struggle with freshman year of college.
Awesome. And we will get more into the social and mental health side as well. Anyone else before I move?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll jump in here briefly, just with a little bit of my own Tufts experience. So I did declare my major pretty early on and stuck with it. But one of the things I did was, I know there are foundation requirements, or there used to be in the kind of degree sheet. And so most of my classmates ended up taking them in electrical engineering, which was our discipline. But I took one in, I think, 3 or 4 different areas. So I took ES5, which was the intro kind of mechanical engineering, statics and dynamics course. I took a chemical engineering course. And so that was different than a lot of my class. And so I was meeting a lot of different people in the program, which was not the typical pathway that people chose.
And for me, I went in with a very clear idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a mechanical engineer and go to work for NASA. That was before the space shuttle had gotten off the ground, which was a while ago. But what I found was, even though I was a very strong math and science student all through high school, that was the thing that got me. Calculus, and then chemistry, and finally physics, which, you know, ironically, I had done great in physics in high school, but I really had a difficult time getting into calculus. That was ultimately the thing that ate my lunch. And so, you know, after freshman year, I decided, you know, I wasn't going to do that. And I did not have a clear idea what I was going to do from there. But the one redeeming thing that I did do freshman year was a programming class in Fortran. And that one class became the genesis of my whole career since then.
Awesome. So going forward, we've heard a lot of switching majors or finding a major later or not really sure. How much of what you do today is what you majored in and what you ended up majoring in? Whether that be senior year or whatever, however long it took you to find the right thing. But how much of your job is really that thing?
Oh man, I'd say like right now, 12%. Like it's really hard to estimate. Like I kind of had a foundational knowledge of a lot of things. And then like when I came into my current job, it's just kind of intermingled. You know, I don't do any of it all the time, but the knowledge is still there and it's foundational and I use it every day. But I mean, you could say 0%. It's totally different, but it's those soft skills, you know, and the foundation.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. So I did undergrad in electrical engineering and actually went out and got a master's degree in it. And now I don't do anything close to electrical engineering on a day-to-day basis. Most of my work ends up being a little bit more business facing. And so it's really helpful to have the context of what I learned because it does factor in how I work with engineering teams and how we bring products to market. But I'm not doing any of the same work I was doing in problem sets or in classes for the past 6 years of my life.
I spent most of today writing a code to process data. So that was not something I learned how to do really in mechanical engineering. I think we took one comp sci class. But it kind of, I mean, I think this has been alluded to, it kind of changes on a day-to-day basis. I designed a fixture to test robots getting wedged. So it's like a common customer complaint is the robot gets stuck under a coffee table or under a couch. And so we're measuring the force that the robot imparts when it's wedged. And that was, I mean, basically something out of my statics class, drawing the beam, figuring out where the loads are, and then calculating what the load is in the middle. A lot of geometry. So it definitely varies day to day. But yeah, it doesn't limit you. I mean, I work in systems test and people come from mechanical, electrical, we have a couple biomedical, computer science, computer engineering. Was something I didn't know existed and was actually what I really like about engineering, kind of the like intersection of a few different areas.
So I'll jump in here. I'm glad you gave me a little bit of a bridge here, Whitney, because so to reiterate, I am a data scientist. I studied statistics for my bachelor's, and then I got a master's in computer science. And I describe data science as the midpoint between statistics and computer science. So I am doing exactly what I studied for every single day of my job. For every single day that I've been in the job that I am now, I could open up any notebook that I wrote in college to any page and use something written on that page for what I do now. And so sometimes I worry that that's a boring or even a wrong answer. Sometimes I get a little bit embarrassed because I know that that's not true for everyone, and that doesn't make for a very interesting story. But the true answer to this question of how much does what I studied apply to what I do now, 100% of what I studied I use today.
And
It's
I
called a
have
good
sort,
investment.
I have sort of a
Yeah.
variation of that. Like I said, that one programming class turned into my career, but I've used that skill, across a half dozen different programming languages in multiple different programming environments, in multiple different companies, on multiple different products, from small consumer products to big network routers. And so for me, it was a matter of finding that one skill that really clicked with me, and and made all the rest possible. And then it was just spending a lot of time, that the time that I didn't spend in college, I still had to spend learning on my own.
So you're hearing kind of a variety of things. For the most part, it does vary day to day. I mean, but what you're doing now, it gives you a background and it gives you a language. I have no idea what Jimmy Briggs does. Okay. I know he does something with software and vision. That's it. But sometimes when Jimmy talks to me, I can make sense of it because of the engineering background. By the same token, Jimmy has no idea what I mean when I say, well, we should do a slump test, because he's not a civil engineer and I wouldn't expect him to know that, right? But it's a way that we can communicate. If I start to explain it, people will understand. So you're getting that background and you're getting a way to start learning how to learn. And that's really what engineering is about. But I also want to jump on, there are definitely skills that I think surprised all of us would be so important later in college. Do we want to talk a little bit about what pieces of your job, are skills you didn't think you'd be using that much? Particularly like Quinn, you're transferring now into a management role. Do you find, what are you doing more of?
I mean, I'm doing so much more planning. It's just and a lot of talking to people. As an engineer, you do a lot of work on your own. Obviously, you have a team, and hopefully that team is wonderful. Working on a good team is a big part of being successful as an engineer. But as a project manager, you frequently feel like a nag because you have to bother people and you have to stay on people's case to get things done. And it's like it can be kind of a struggle sometimes, because you feel like, number one, maybe you don't have to be such a nag. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. And also you have to worry about like jeopardizing relationships, because I love being friendly at work. Having relationships with people is something I value. So finding a balance between building that friendship and also working professionally can be interesting. But I mean, in terms of skills from college, yeah, it was planning. I loved leading teams in college. I was frequently like the unannounced but like subtle person driving a schedule, or corralling a team, which kind of led me down the path that I am. I found that I enjoy that the most, so I kind of just followed that itch to the role that I'm in. And I can talk more later, but I had to work pretty hard to get in this role. It wasn't like oh, hey, there's an opportunity, let me see if I can get it. It was like a 6-month journey of, I want to do this thing, let me corral my network to make it happen. But yeah, it's learning new skills every day, and it's just people management instead of technical management.
Who else?
I think something that surprised me. So I spent most of my undergraduate and graduate career doing a lot of TA work. And part of the reason I think is that it's work that I really enjoyed. I like being in front of a crowd. I like, performing a little bit, but I also like being involved in other people's learning process. That's really fun for me. And what I found is that I get a lot of really positive feedback when I give presentations about things that I or a team I'm working on have built, because during that teaching practice, I've developed the skills to break something that seems fairly complicated on first glance down into something that can be understood by non-experts, or at least I hope I have.
Yeah, I think that's a really important skill that I learned in grad school. One of the labs that I worked with was a biology lab, and so we were constantly having to figure out how to explain things to each other in ways that we would both understand. Just learning those kind of communication skills and how to present data is super important.
There's this project, just to share a little anecdote, there's a project I was working on where we have these two things that are communicating with each other, two different types of computers. And I was giving a presentation one day and it was clear to me that no one in the audience got it. So I just like turned off the presentation and I explained it with the analogy that it was like a game of Marco Polo that you'd play in a pool. And since the whole project has been renamed the Marco Polo Project. So it's really surprising what a little bit of improv will do for you in the field.
Very true.
That's super cool.
Anybody else?
Freaking obsessed with that.
I would say my experience is a little bit similar to Quinn's as well, given that we're maybe a little bit further from the engineering side day to day now. I'd say the biggest thing that I learned or used from college now is probably reasonable estimation. So there are a lot of things that you don't know ahead of time, especially when you're factoring in timelines from the engineering team and business needs. And a lot of what product managers do is kind of bring that all together from disparate sources. And so similar to my experience at Tufts, senior engineering, there was senior design for the electrical engineering department. And I'd say maybe 75% of the work we did in that class was more like deliverables on timelines and what needed to be done and what the risks were and costs were. And that has been so much more vital to the work that I do today than I ever would have thought possible. Because I think as an engineer, you know that those things matter, but you also think like, oh, that'll be like 25% of my time. And most of it will be spent actually sitting with a piece of technology and making it work. And even though I'm not doing engineering day to day today, I'd still imagine that most people here do a lot more of that kind of work than they ever thought they would.
To follow up on, oh, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
No, you go ahead, Jimmy. I'll round this out with an anecdote. You go first.
Well, to follow up on what Ryan was saying, one of the things that I learned in grad school through some hard fought lessons was that if you have something you can show people, it's worth a lot more than a system that's really well built, which is super painful for you as like a mathematician or engineer or scientist, because you're like, oh, but I did such a beautiful job. But if you have like a really lovely visualization you can show people, it's worth like 1,000 times that much. And it took me a while to realize that, but it was a good lesson.
Plus 1,000. Yes, I'm actually, I could, Jimmy, honestly, you and I should like have coffee to talk about what I'm doing right now. I feel like you'd really vibe. But I so relate to what you're saying, because right now I'm doing something that's so mathematically so cool, but I have to boil it down to a really cool graph to make everyone else think it's really cool. But back to the question at hand. I will actually trace my personal timeline back to elementary school, and then we'll end up back at college, and then we'll end up in my job now. So from 3rd through 8th grade, every summer I went to theater camp. And so I have a history in doing theater, and I'm very comfortable in front of a crowd, love being in front of a crowd, love performing. So that built that foundation of me being very comfortable, like raising my hand, talking, speaking publicly. I brought that into college, and like, you know, I've mentioned a couple times, I studied math in college. And as all of you could maybe assume, math majors, not the biggest talkers. So I built up in college this reputation amongst the math majors that I found out at the end of my senior year. I didn't know I had this reputation as the math major that would ask questions. And especially amongst the international students in my major, apparently, I found this out later, everyone was always really excited when I was in their class because it meant that somebody was going to ask questions so they would actually understand what was going on. So the way that this then traces up into my job today, so I was a very vocal person in my major. I would always raise my hand, always ask questions. And because of this, an administrator put my name into the hat to interview this person that was hired to be the director of our startup accelerator at BU. So then I was on her interview panel. She got to know me. And then later she ended up hiring me as a project manager for the startup accelerator. So now here in college and then later in grad school, I now have this experience of being a project manager for this startup accelerator. And specifically, I was the project manager for data science projects. now I come into my job today and I am a data scientist that, one, is very comfortable public speaking, very comfortable speaking up in a meeting or in a crowd. That's apparently kind of rare. But also I'm a data scientist with this project management lens, which has actually gotten me kind of fast tracked into a data science lead role, which has been a really cool experience. And I feel like I tripped and fell into it. And it's just because I have a background in managing people, managing a project, and it's gotten me into this lead role just because I would raise my hand and ask questions in college.
Yeah, and once again, I'll kind of jump to the extreme because I am that introvert who can't speak in front of people, yet I'm doing it now. And so one of the things that was a huge help for me was way back very early in my career. One of the people I worked with, and basically, sort of a mentor figure who I really respected. He said, "Oh, we do this Toastmasters thing." And I said, "Toastmasters, what is that? Is that like drinking something or what?" And he said, "No, it's learning about public speaking, giving toasts." And so he got me into that, and eventually I could speak more than 3 words in front of a crowd of people, but it got me very comfortable. And so leading in, it turns out that even though engineering is a lot of, like we said, individualized work, it's also a lot of communication. You have to be able to write stuff down in a way that other people can understand it, get information across. You have to be able to speak in front of people. And, if you see that your audience isn't getting what you're saying, just like Jimmy said, you've got to be able to switch like that and come up with well, let's look at it this way, or let's look at it that way. And, just those basic communication skills and public speaking are really, really turn out to be important. And if you don't feel comfortable with public speaking, then definitely look for a Toastmasters program. There may be one on campus. There's a whole bunch of them all over the place. So find one and just get comfortable talking in front of people.
I just want to say, I love the way that you're bringing this to a group called Toastmasters, Steve, just because something that I always say is, yes, I'm a data scientist. Yes, I'm a scientist and a tech person, whatever, but I'm a storyteller. At my core, I'm a storyteller. And every day I go into work and I say, what story am I telling? And to go back to what you were saying earlier, Jimmy, that's why visualizations are so helpful, because visualizations, they're worth 1,000 words. Pictures worth 1,000 words. That's a 1,000 word story that you're telling. And viewing myself like that, that's made my work more meaningful and made everything more exciting, because it's like, oh, I'm telling a story with a start, a middle, and end. It has a protagonist. It has a hook.
So you're hearing a lot of different pieces, a lot of transition into different jobs, but those soft skills are really going to matter. So get some practice talking. Writing is huge. Listening is a big skill. And they will surprise you when they pop up. We had another call where a woman began as a graphic artist major. She's now a data scientist, but she said she's pulling in on that graphic artist stuff a lot because she has to present her data. We do a ton of PowerPoints, too many PowerPoints, too many, I spend all day writing. So it is all going to kind of pull together. I want to get to the meat of the panel. So it's permission to fail. You're looking at a lot of people who have amazing jobs at iRobot. Believe it or not, they are all not complete rock stars who, never had an issue along the way. They also don't know all the answers. We use Google constantly at work. We're not trying to, pretend that we know all the answers. But let's talk about those failures, be it in college or on the job. What happened? Were there particular tests that you thought were going to take you down? Was there classes? Did you fail classes? Did you have to, what'd you do? And were there ways out of that? Let's hear a couple failure stories and then quickly move on to how we come through the other side.
I just want to jump in just because I have so many thoughts on exactly this topic. So I love these permission to fail panels. I love being on them. I love talking about them. And I was talking about this permission to fail tour with another product manager. And she just point blank asked me, if somebody asks you, like, what does failure mean to you? What would you tell to someone? about like, what does it mean to fail? What would you say? And my stories are my biggest failures actually turned into my biggest successes in college. And so for me, permission to fail actually means permission to ask for help. So I alluded to this before. I studied statistics in college, started off loving it, and I ended loving it. But in the middle, I freaking hated it. Hated it. Straight up, like wanted to transfer, thought I made a horrible mistake. And it's because of really these two main classes that I took that I failed everything. I was horrible at them. And I was sitting in the front row and I was asking questions in class and just nothing was sinking in. And in both classes, the first probably couple of exams, I straight up failed. Where, you know, I feel like in a lot of engineering classes, you can get like a 30 on the exam and you end up passing because of the curve. No, everybody else was getting like 90s, 100s, and I was getting straight 30s, like absolutely failing. And I was miserable. I thought I loved what I was doing. I didn't. So finally, I sent this tear-stained email to my academic advisor in the first of these two classes and was like, I thought I liked what I was doing and I thought I just don't know what I'm doing anymore. And like now I'm failing all these exams. Like, is there anyone that you know who can tutor me? And like I said, this was for the first of two classes. And this started my relationship with my tutor that I ended up getting, who is the apple of my eye, the light of my life. This tutor got me through everything in college. We ended up having like a multi-year relationship with him as my tutor. It was great because he had just had a baby. So I was paying him for tutoring, helping fund his new child. But these huge failures led me to getting this tutor who then was just so gentle and patient with me, loved what he did in statistics, patiently explained all of these concepts to me. And I ended up on the final exam getting one of the highest grades in the class because I was with this tutor and he just slowly explained these concepts, wove them into a story, and I was able to internalize them in a way that the professors of the class couldn't get people to do. And so these massive failures that I had at the start of these classes with just horrible grades, absolute fails, I got this tutor and I turned them around into huge successes. And now these two classes that I hated are now, you know, they were awful classes because they were so important. And I use the concepts in these classes every single day. And so for me, failure is just an opportunity to ask for help. And so these times that I failed so dramatically, they were really the first times in my life that I just fell to my knees in like absolute abject failure and asked for help.
Who else? Professors that took you down, classes?
I think just this is from like a job perspective, but I think sometimes as well, failure is, you can't necessarily turn it into a success, but you can show that you have learned and that you aren't repeating the same mistakes. So I think I've been in iRobot like 8 months or so, and we were sending out some of our evacuation docks to get tested. And because of how you test them, you have to remove this thermal cutoff that prevents the motor from overheating, because we have to like turn the motor on and keep it on for the duration of this test. And I was taking them all out and trying to do it quickly. So we have to like take the whole thing apart, put it back together. It takes 10 or 15 minutes. And I had like a flight later that day. So I was trying to do it quickly, install the special software on them, pack them back up and send them out. I installed the software and tested the dock before I took the thermocouple out. And when I put everything back together, I didn't plug one of the motor wires back in. So when we sent it to the facility that they were testing it, they didn't work. Thankfully, my boss and I were both there. Although I guess on the unfortunate side, my boss was also there and saw that none of them work. So I had to take them all apart again, connect the wire, put them all back together, and you know, it worked and it was fine, and thankfully we're there. But it was kind of the importance of like you test everything, you make sure it works before you ship it out. And, in the moment, there was nothing I could do to fix it other than say, yep, I made a mistake. I thought I tested it, but I was in a rush and I messed up. And I think you just learn to own stuff like that and show that you aren't doing that again. My boss, I think, saw that I was like pretty embarrassed and felt pretty dumb about it, and was like, like, people make mistakes. As long as you don't do the same thing over and over again, stuff happens. We were here, it all worked out. But that was kind of it's I guess a different type of failure. There's not necessarily an opportunity to, like, I don't know, just different
Turn
type
that
of
around
failure.
very quickly.
Yeah.
Anyone
And-
else?
And so I've actually kind of made failure a part of my process. Not necessarily that I'm intending to fail, but more with the expectation that, look, it's going to happen. So let it happen, see what you can learn from it. Some things turn into experiments when you didn't really want them to be an experiment, but they all provide information. And so I was actually, one of our friends has a son who just graduated recently and is looking for his first job. And, he's wanting to learn about embedded systems. And I said, well, embedded systems, you learn a lot out of it just from the failures. And what ends up happening is you fail your way, you work your way one failure at a time to success. And so a lot of it turns out to be just, getting the resilience to say, you know what, stuff is going to go wrong. As long as the world doesn't end, you can probably go back and try it again, right? And the same was true for, when I quit college, it was those math courses that killed me. So a few years later, I went back and I took them at night school. We actually used the same textbooks, even though it was community college instead of, a big expensive school. But I completely changed my study approach. And my recipe for success studying that stuff, if you're having difficulty with it, is you do every single problem in the section that's assigned, then you do all the odd problems that aren't assigned that have the answers in the back, and then you do all the even problems. And then every time you have a test, you do them all over again. And when you have a midterm and a final, you do them all over again. So by the time you come to final, you've done every single problem in the book up to that point, like 4 times. And so by the time I was getting through that, in 3 semesters of calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, I was getting 100 on all these tests, right? When before I was, consistently maybe pulling a C out of it and usually worse. So, it's a matter of taking those failures and treating them as learning opportunities. And sometimes it's really painful, right? It really does hurt, and it may knock you back for a while, but the key is to get back up and either go back at it or find a different direction to go where you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and say, I think one of the things that can be hard is there's a lot wrapped up in the word failure. And I think engineering kind of redefines that a little bit. Megan put something in the chat of fail fast, fail forward. And I think that is very true about how engineers go about doing work, because it's not a failure if something doesn't happen the way you expected it to. You've learned something about the process. And I think the biggest part about engineering, and honestly any role in the future, is figuring out, how do I test things that I don't know early so that a bad consequence is small. And by the time I'm shipping out thousands or hundreds of thousands of robots, I don't have a big problem, because I've had hundreds of small failures along the way that mean I know almost everything by the time it's in a consumer's hands, just to bring it to the level of what we do a little bit day to day. But the same thing happened in my senior design project and my junior design project, of having to have 2 different robots that were communicating to each other. And for the life of us, we could not figure out why it would work sometimes and not others. And we redid it 1,000 times, but we learned something with each iteration that got us a little bit closer. And by the end, we had failed, by most people's definition, way too many times, but the end result was something that was so much better.
There are going to be classes and projects that don't go the right direction. You are going to fail tests. You are going to let yourself down. And it happened to every one of the people on this call. They all failed something. In our mechanical engineers, I have yet to find anybody who got through thermo or heat transfer without a hitch. Maybe what Whitney was talking about with our motors, I don't know, but all of them cite that class. Statistics, we have one young lady who took it 6 times. So it happens. It doesn't mean that you're not cut out for this. It just means you have to rethink how you're going to get through to the next piece. And if it means taking that withdraw, do it. You can always make it back up later. Right? People withdraw from classes all the time. I want to quickly go over though, what did you do? How did you find help studying? Steve alluded to his process. What worked for you? And on the flip side of that, what else can you do to kind of get outside of your head? How did you find that mental health as well? Anybody want to jump on that?
I can jump in real quick, not on the mental health side, but on the other side, and say the biggest thing that I can think of that helps is never feel like there's a stupid question. I am the king of asking any question that comes into my mind, whether I think it's stupid or I should know it. And at the end of the day, you are way better off having asked it, even if you think like everyone else in the room knows it. Usually someone else doesn't. Sometimes no one does. And asking it is so much better than thinking like, oh, I should just like stay quiet. Yeah, like don't feel bad when you don't know something. Everyone's been in that position at some point in their life, and everyone's going to be in that position again. You only don't succeed if you don't ask and clarify for yourself.
Very true.
I have a funny anecdote of hubris. So when I was younger, really afraid of looking stupid to myself, if that makes sense. As an example, I took an 8 a.m. linear algebra class my second semester of college, which already is insane. But I did it without a book. I decided that I would be able somehow to learn linear algebra without a textbook, which is absolutely bonkers as an idea. And at that point, I realized that not only did I not have a book, but I didn't really have any study skills either, barely passed that class. And I think one of the things that I worked on after that was I would just type my stupid questions into Google as if I were a 5-year-old and see what it said. So for instance, I searched, how do you learn linear algebra? Which seems like a really stupid question. And even typing it in, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally 4. But then suddenly there were a whole bunch of guides that came up of like syllabi, for instance. It's something that I've learned is if you look at a syllabus, it gives you a really good idea of what you should actually care about while you're learning. And then, I'd go on YouTube and I'd see like Math Girl or whatever her name was. She's like the old 3 brown, 1 blue or whatever it is from way back in the day. Love her. And finding those kinds of resources outside of class was really empowering for me because I realized that in some ways I was, by not knowing things, being an even better student because I was finding more resources. And then, you share those with your friends, and then you talk to your friends or classmates if you don't have friends about how you're learning and what you're learning, and you can get resources from them as well. So everybody can really benefit. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, it's good.
I loved every second of that from start to finish. I was 100% riveted.
Think about how you learn best, right? Is it Googling for other stuff? Is it study groups? Is it working on your own? What time of day works best? Go to your professors. You have paid these people for office hours. Go use those office hours, right? Jimmy was a TA. Go to the TA because he's getting paid too. You might as well make him work for it. But
yeah, TAs are great. Just sorry to interject, but
they are.
Absolutely.
Free tutors are great too. I was a physics tutor on my campus, and I loved that job. I loved physics. I was in ME, but my passion at the time was physics, so I was taking all the classes that I could fit in.
There's no tutor.
I was also a physics tutor, and I feel like it really helped me learn it a lot better as well. And my best friend in my major and I would do kind of exactly that. We would teach each other things.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing you can do.
Yeah,
is try and teach each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gotta know what to teach it. And if you don't know when you start teaching, you'll learn it as you teach.
Yeah, and that's where the group study comes in, if that works for you. Upperclassmen who've taken the test, right? If somebody has old copies of old tests, then definitely study from them, because professors are not that creative. Eventually, the problems look kind of the same, right? But find the thing that works for you, and then find a way to get out of your headspace. I don't know what some of you guys did, but if it's athletics, then you go for a walk. Everybody at iRobot goes outside and goes for a lap around the building, or uses the gym, or some, maybe it's ping pong. I don't know, writing, reading, knitting. Do you guys have anything that you specifically used in college to kind of do that reset?
I'll say,
Oh,
who jumped in first? I cut him off. I'll go last.
Go ahead.
well, my roommate and I used to go for a run most days after class. We'd both get home, and it was just kind of like for me, it's like a nice outlet of energy and a nice way to kind of clear my head. I still normally go for a run at the end of the day.
I was not mentally healthy when I was studying for things in college. I didn't have healthy habits until I was a senior for sure. But something that I wish I did earlier than senior year. What I would do is I was a big time like crammer for tests. And so by senior year, I finally learned studying the 30 minutes before the test for me, not going to do much. So I started a habit of 30 minutes before a test, I would close everything. And either if I was sitting in the building where I was going to take the test, a lot of times I would get to the classroom where I was going to take a test like 45 minutes to an hour before the test started. I would close everything, put my backpack in a corner, and literally walk laps around the building. And I started to get to know a lot of the buildings on my campus really well, because I would just walk laps around them before an exam. So I'd close everything for 30 minutes before. If it was a really nice day outside, I'd close everything and go lay on a bench outside and set a timer on my phone for like 20 minutes, still get back to the classroom 10 minutes in advance. And learning, those 30 minutes before an exam, nothing's going to happen. Get myself into a better headspace, whether it's just sitting and staring at the wall. Walking laps around buildings is really fun because I found weird corners that nobody else knew about. Laying on benches when it was nice out. Great. Otherwise, Whitney, I'm honestly jealous of how mentally healthy you sounded like you were if you went on a run at the end of every day. That's amazing.
yeah, I mean, I just to add on to that, like, I think using your health services or your mental health services, I'm obsessive compulsive and I have panic disorder, and college was where I finally got treated for that. So just, it's a great resource. It's most universities, they're free, or a certain number of sessions are free. Like it really was like kind of what got me through college and like helped me be successful later on. And the other thing I would add to that is, if the first person you see is not a good fit, there are other people. And so you can absolutely like fire your therapist and find someone else. I have done that, and it can only work out in the best for you.
I've had a lot of very bad shrinks, or for me at least, really, really bad fits since college, like over and over and over again. And it wasn't until after school, I'm realizing this is a discouraging thing to say. It's not until after I left school that I found someone who I could work with in a way that felt effective for me. But you could find that person on your first try or your second try or your fifth try. I do think it is worth trying, because not trying sucks.
So I wanted to mention a little bit about just study skills, because my problem was that I had never developed study skills in high school. I was used to getting all my homework done in the 5 minutes you get at the end of class, and then I don't need to take a book home. Well, in college, what I didn't realize was that realistically, you need to spend at least an hour outside the class for every hour inside the class. And that's just the bare minimum. And so what got me through the math classes later was it really turned out to be more like 2, even 3 hours. So, because I also took retook my physics class. It was a lab class, and physics lab time can be time consuming. So, you really need to plan on spending 2 to 3 hours, just on a rough average outside of class for every hour that you spend in class. And, you wonder what you're doing with all the rest of your day. That's what it's for.
And
So,
one last thing, similar to Whitney, I also did kind of exercise as my thing that let me kind of break away from all of the schoolwork and come back to a place where I felt comfortable. But what I'll say is that's different for everyone. The biggest thing that I would suggest is find something that makes you happy, completely happy, and spend half an hour doing that every day where you only focus on that. Even if you have lots of schoolwork, even if you have a big test, taking that time to recenter yourself and do something that isn't stressing you will make you so much better when you go back to doing your schoolwork or back to solving a problem.
those are all amazing points. I was a swimmer in college. I cannot tell you how many problem sets got solved in that pool because my head was clear. You want to do the thing that takes you out of your space. The mental health counseling is key. It's free on campus, or at least free to a certain point. It's never going to be free again in your life. And so take advantage of that. What I'm most impressed by, especially this year doing these panels, is how open our panelists have been about mental health and the challenge of staring at tiny boxes for the last 2 years. And we all can't stand the Zoom thing, but they've also been really open. And I'm sure this happens to the rest of you. How many times in a meeting somebody will say, well, I was talking to my therapist about that last week. And it's just a part of the conversation for us now at work, and it should be in your life as well, particularly because it's free, because we're paying for it. So use all your resources, use your friends, use your professors for extra help. We're coming up on the end of an hour. I want to make sure we get to any questions that you may have. And I know it's hard to ask questions. We've gone over that. So what I'm going to do, my email is stem@irobot.com. That comes straight to me. I can put you in touch with any one of the panelists or somebody else at iRobot, somebody else who does something. I didn't touch on internships because we're running out of space, but they are critical to your mission. If you can do an internship, it gets you experience. It lets you know if you like something or if you don't. We are fine if you leave an internship saying, I never want to do that again. That's okay. And it'll help you kind of get those connections and that network. At the very beginning, we mentioned how Megan wanted the intern that Whitney has. Whitney has that intern because she reached out to me in college. And when she was a junior and senior, she spoke to me, this is what I like, this is what I'm interested in. I connected her to Whitney, who happened to have a PhD in that topic. She's working for Whitney now. She was an intern under her, and now she's a full-time employee, and she's finding her way, to what she loves at iRobot. So it really does work to talk to people and ask questions. All right. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I will send you guys the recording when I have it and I have a chance. Please email if, there's something that we can help with. We love talking to people. If, quite honestly, that's what gets us out of our headspace and changes our day up too. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all the
Bye.
iRobot tears. This was so fun. You all are great.
Bye.